This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
What's up, guys? Your boy Benny. JD Vance having one hell of a week running toward the gunfire. As they say in the military, JD Vance, somebody who did actually serve in the military and serve in wartime, unlike the vice presidential candidate. On the other side, JD Vance went into the lion's den, into the arena, into the war zone, as it were, and ripped to shreds 3 different corporate media reporters this weekend. It was an absolute masterclass. We were long on JD Vance, okay? Some people were like, man, he's a liability to Trump. Man, Trump made the wrong pick. Watch these interviews, all 3 of them, and see what you think. Don Jr., for instance, one of the guys who was like a big-time fan and backer of JD Vance, along with Tucker Carlson. So why does Don Jr., Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and some of the basest donors from Silicon Valley, all of these guys wanted JD Vance? There's a reason why. There's a reason why they wanted JD. Vivek Ramaswamy wanted JD Vance. And, I wanted Vivek Ramaswamy. So it's like, the friend of my friend, enemy of my enemy. So this is why there is now seen the reason that you can have someone like Trump and JD Vance work successfully is because JD Vance is like intellectualized Trump. I'm not saying Trump isn't smart. I'm just saying it's a different style. And that style, sort of extends to a very high IQ. I got the guy has like an IQ of 170, JD Vance, who again is a hero and who went and served his country as a Marine, signed up after 9/11 and served in war. And the first thing he did this past weekend, he gave 3 different interviews, was to absolutely eviscerate CNN trying to carry water for stolen valor Tim Walz, who is a guy who lied about his service time and time again. Lied about his service. This is a masterclass. Check this out.
And on the question of when he left the National Guard, he filed his election paperwork February 10th, 2005. That was a month before the National Guard even announced that it was possible that they would deploy to Iraq, and it ended up being 2 months. He retired 2 months before they actually got the paperwork.
But on CNN last night, Dana, one of the people who was actually in charge of him said they knew they were going to deploy to Iraq in February of 2004, fall of 2004. So he knew he was going to Iraq. He decided to quit, to retire, whatever word you want to use.
Retire.
Because he wanted to run for Congress. He lied about that. He said that when he decided to retire, he did not know that he was going to Iraq. That is another untruth, as even his senior military officer said. So again, I'm not criticizing the service. I'm criticizing the dishonesty. Dishonesty spoken in favor and for the purpose of political benefit. And I think that the most important thing here, Dana, is it goes to Kamala Harris's judgment. Tim Walz is ultimately going to be the vice president. Kamala Harris is in great health. I'm sure she's going to be president if she wins for 4 or maybe even 8 years. Why did Kamala Harris choose a person who has lied about their military service? I think that is a serious lapse in judgment. And I don't want to hear from a campaign spokesperson of Kamala Harris. I want to hear Kamala Harris herself address what I just said.
I've seen a lot of statements from veterans, including those you served with, saying it's just untoward to be criticizing somebody who served for 24 years.
Dana, I'm not interested in the ad hominem. I've heard from a lot of veterans groups who criticize Tim Walz. The question is, he said he served in war, and he didn't. That is a dishonesty. I couldn't care less what one or the other person says about it. I care about what the truth is. The truth is that Tim Walz didn't tell the truth. And importantly, Dana, this is about Kamala Harris's judgment. And I think that when you ask, why has Kamala Harris allowed the border to be wide open? Why has Kamala Harris supported policies that have promoted the increase in inflation? I think it goes to the heart of her judgment, and I think that that's what we should be talking about.
One last question. Donald Trump didn't serve in the military. He received a medical draft deferment for bone spurs to avoid serving in the Vietnam War, reportedly as a favor to his father. Do you find that shameful, too?
I think that Donald Trump didn't serve in the military, but he didn't lie about it, Dana. I've known Donald Trump for a long time. He really honors our veterans. He honors me for my service. Donald Trump didn't lie about serving in the military. He didn't say that he went to Vietnam when he didn't. This is the problem. I don't criticize anybody. Whether they served our country or not, I think it's honorable to serve, but obviously a lot of people have reasons for not serving. I criticize somebody for embellishing their record, for lying, saying, I went to war. Dana, do you think that it's a problem that he said, I went to war, but he didn't actually? That seems to be a problem to me.
Well, they've corrected that. Let's move on to...
They've corrected it by admitting that he lied.
Let's move on to another important issue to voters.
JD Vance continuing the carpet bombing of truth bombing here with more in-depth conversation about the lies of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris.
Dana, I criticized his lying about his own record, okay? This is a guy who was captured on video saying, I carried a gun in war. He never went to war. This is a guy who's been captured on video. As other people say, he's an Afghanistan veteran. He's a veteran of a war, nodding along in agreement instead of saying, no, I did serve my country and I did it honorably, but I never went to a war zone. I'm not criticizing Tim Walz's service. I'm criticizing the fact that he lied about his service for political gain, Dana. You've now asked me 3 questions about comments that I made 3 years ago. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she supported policies that opened the American southern border. I wonder what Kamala Harris thinks about the fact that she lied to the American people about Joe Biden's middle facility for the office. You are interviewing me, Dana, because I respect the American people enough to sit down for an interview.
I appreciate that.
Kamala Harris has been the nominee for 3 weeks. She hasn't sat down for a real interview.
Believe me, we are asking. You're not going to get a disagreement there.
But the point is, Dana, you've got me for 15 minutes or however long you have me. We should be talking about public policies that matter. How are we going to lower inflation? How are we going to reduce the cost of food and housing? How are we going to close down that southern border? We've talked so little about that. We've talked a lot more about a sarcastic remark I made 3 years ago. I think we should talk about the issues that most Americans care. Kamala Harris is whatever she says she is, but I believe importantly that President Trump is right that she's a chameleon. She pretends to be one thing in front of one audience. She pretends to be something different in front of another audience. Look, Dana, she's not running a political campaign. She's running a movie. She only speaks to voters behind a teleprompter. Everything is scripted. She doesn't have her policy positions out there. She hasn't answered why she wanted to ban fracking, but now she doesn't. She wanted to fund police, but now she doesn't. She wanted to open the border, but now she doesn't. She should have to answer for why she presents a different set of policies to one audience and a different set of policies to another audience. And I think that's what President Trump is getting at. This is a fundamentally fake person. She's different depending on who she's in front of. Dan, I criticize people for not having kids. I criticize people for being anti-child. And I do think that Kamala Harris has made some bizarre statements. She has said things like it's reasonable not to have children over climate change. I think it's the exact opposite message we should be sending to our young families. I want to expand the child tax credit. I want to stop those surprise medical bills. I want to make housing more affordable so that if you have a young family, you can actually afford to put them in a home. And I think that it is unfortunate that so much of our public leadership has become anti-family. One final point on this, Dana. If you go back to the COVID era, one thing that really frustrated me, please.
Are you going to debate Tim Walz?
Of course. I want to debate Tim Walz. I think it's important. And I think that it goes to a very fundamental difference between the Trump-Vance ticket and our opposition. We believe in talking to the media. We believe in answering questions. We believe in debating. I think it's really important. I mean, look, I'm asking the American people to make me their vice president. It's really important to stand before the American people to make that case, and I'm going to keep on doing it in whatever forum I get the opportunity. So
we look forward to it. Thank you so much for
Dana.
Sitting down and taking my questions.
Of course. Thank you for coming here.
And JD Vance proving that misdirection is something that he's not going to bite. JD Vance talking about Kamala Harris as the borders are, something you're not allowed to say. Oh, the memo went out. The thing we all said you're not allowed to say. Here we go.
Well, John, we have to start with the fact that we have a wide open southern border because our border czar actually set a lot of open border policies. They suspended.
She's not actually. She wasn't the border czar.
Oh, that was what the media called her. She assumed the title. She had control over a lot of our border policy at a time when they were suspending. Let me finish, John. The time they were suspending deportations, they stopped Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, and they reinstituted catch and release. They basically threw open the gates of our country, and now we have a ton of fentanyl, a ton of people suffering.
But how are you going to get 10 to 15 to 20 million people out of the country?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to stop the bleeding, stop the open border, get Kamala Harris out of there, and actually re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy, rebuild or finish Donald Trump's border wall, and you do that and you stop the bleeding. Now, you're right. Once you do that, once you stop Kamala Harris's open border policies, you've got to do something with the people who are already here. And I think that you take a sequential approach to it. You are going to have to deport some people. If you're not willing to deport a lot of people, you're not willing to have a border when there are 20 million illegal aliens in our country.
10 to 15 million people, this is like, I mean...
Well, John, I think it's the wrong attitude to take of it. Okay,
so you go knock on doors and ask people for their papers,
again, but
what do you do?
let me finish. I think this is the wrong attitude towards it, right? There's 20 million people here illegally. You start with what's achievable. You do that, and then you go on to what's achievable from there. I think that if you deport a lot of violent criminals, and frankly, if you make it harder to hire illegal labor, which undercuts the wages of American workers, I think you go a lot of the way to solving the illegal immigration problem. But look, President Trump is absolutely right. You cannot have a border unless you're willing to deport some people. I think it's interesting that people focus on, well, how do you deport 18 million people? Let's start with 1 million. That's where Kamala Harris has failed, and then we can go from there.
I think it's really interesting that reporter there that was simping for Kamala is also on camera being like, Kamala Harris is the border czar. It's amazing. Check this out.
It was back in 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, that the president put Vice President Kamala Harris in playing a critical role in terms of trying to stop the flow of migrants across the border. I mean, she was more than 2 years ago she got this responsibility.
No, she's not actually. She wasn't the borders.
Totally and completely Orwellian, and a complete and total disgrace, frankly, to the profession. It shows you how journalism works. JD Vance did a wonderful job carrying himself in these interviews. JD Vance was shadowboxing with these people, and it's not more apparent than this when JD Vance just proves that, like, he probably has twice the IQ than the reporter here. Watch.
Do you view China as a competitor or an adversary?
I think they're both, right? And I think that what we want to do here is build the kind of international order where we can check China. We don't want to go to war with China, but certainly they're an adversary. I mean, they know, for example, the Chinese know that they're manufacturing tons of fentanyl they're letting come into our country. Kamala Harris has done nothing about this. She should apply diplomatic and economic leverage over the Chinese to stop manufacturing this fentanyl, which then comes into the Mexican drug cartels, which they then ship into our country.
The United States has designated some of these groups
this is a
and pressed
scandal.
the Chinese government.
Oh, we could do so much more. Fentanyl is not easy to manufacture, Margaret. And if Harris was applying proper leverage to the Chinese and to the Mexican drug cartels, we would not have so many people dying of fentanyl overdoses.
How do you do that? What's your vision of how you do that?
I think you walk into Beijing, you talk to Xi Jinping, and you say your entire economy is going to collapse unless you get access to American markets. You need to take this fentanyl seriously, or we are going to impose serious tariffs and economic penalties for not following our laws and not helping us stem the flow of this deadly poison.
I started off by saying that JD Vance has had a hell of a week. JD Vance has had a hell of a week. JD Vance began the week by calling out stolen valor, Tim Walz, and then ended the week by calling out Kamala Harris to her face, which is pretty awesome. JD Vance on Tim Walz saying, dude has stolen valor.
Sir.
Last night, Governor Walz suggested that because of your Ivy League education and your Silicon backing your political career, that you yourself are part of the elite. What are your first impressions of them trying to frame you this way to the American public?
Well, look, I came from a family where nobody in my family had ever gone to law school. I grew up in a poor family. The fact that Tim Walz wants to turn it into a bad thing, that I actually worked myself through college, through law school, and made something myself. To me, that's the American dream. And if Tim Walz wants to insult it, I think that's frankly pretty bizarre. Now, look, what really bothers me about Tim Walz, it's not even the positions that he's taken, though certainly he has been a far left radical. You know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq, to make a promise that you're going to follow through, and then to drop out right before you actually have to go. I also think it's dishonest. Something, again, if you guys ever get an opportunity to ask Tim Walz or Kamala Harris some questions, he made this interesting comment
that the Kamala Harris campaign put out there, and I bet they're regretting they put it out there now, because he said that and he was making a point about gun control. He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
And the best clip of the week, without question, last week. We'll see what happens in the Trump X Spaces tonight. The best clip of the week, was JD Vance walking up to Kamala Harris's plane and being like, "She's not going to do a press conference. How about your boy?" Check it out.
All right. So I know you're covering the Vice President here. I figured I'd come by and one, just give a good look at the plane. Hopefully, it's going to be my plane in a few months. But I also thought you guys might get lonely, because the Vice President doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters? No? Nobody? Okay, great. Well, I hope that she changes her mind, because it'd be good for the American people, and I think it'd be good for you all if she actually ran a real campaign instead of one from a basement with a teleprompter. So have a good one, guys. See ya. What would you like to hear from her? Questions. I'd love her to just answer what she wants to do, and also explain why every single position she has changed. She pretends to be a prosecutor, yet she pretends to be a tough on crime prosecutor, and yet here she is wanting to defund the police. She's the border czar, yet she's opened up the American southern border. This is a person who has to answer the questions from the media, and it's disgraceful that she wrote for you guys. It's also insulting to the American people. But anyway, we're going to go do our event. I appreciate you guys being here. I wish she paid you some more attention. See ya.